Your son is a racist, Delaline. A racist who raised a racist son. The words hung in the church fellowship hall like a physical thing I could touch. I set my coffee cup down on the metal table, carefully. My fingers felt strange, disconnected from my hands. Around me, the Sunday morning crowd had gone quiet. Heads turned, eyes found me. I'd said one thing. One small criticism about Gianna's cooking at the family dinner 3 weeks ago. Not even a harsh thing. Just an observation that the green bean casserole seemed a bit bland. That was all. But that wasn't what everyone was hearing now. The woman who'd spoken, Vivielle Thomas, the church's diversity coordinator, stood with her arms crossed. Her daughter stood beside her. Behind them, at least 20 people had stopped moving. The coffee station fell silent. Even the children's laughter from the other rooms seemed to fade. I opened my mouth, closed it again. Because in that moment, I understood something terrible. The story had already been written. I was already guilty. 3 weeks earlier, my son Owen had brought his wife Gianna to our family dinner. They'd been married for 8 months. I still barely knew her. Owen had introduced her only 6 months before the wedding, which had surprised me, but I'd kept quiet about it. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted my son to be happy. The dinner was at my house. I'd cooked for 4 hours. Prime rib, roasted potatoes, fresh vegetables, a salad with homemade dressing. Gianna had insisted on bringing a dish. She'd arrived with a green bean casserole in a disposable aluminum pan, the kind you pick up from the grocery store freezer section. My mother had taught me to make green bean casserole from scratch when I was 9 years old. Fresh green beans, real cream of mushroom soup, crispy fried onions on top. It was one of my signature dishes. But I'd never mentioned that to Gianna. I wouldn't have been rude about it. During dinner, as we passed the dishes around the table, I'd simply said, "The casserole seems a little bland. Maybe it needs more seasoning next time. A touch of garlic powder perhaps, or some fresh herbs." That was it. A gentle suggestion, the kind of thing any family member might say. Owen had looked at me strangely. Then he'd looked at Gianna. She'd smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile that meant something else entirely. "It's fine," Gianna had said quietly. "Some people prefer simple flavors." I'd let it drop. The dinner had continued. Nobody had seemed upset. Nobody had said anything else about it. But apparently, that comment had meant something completely different to Owen and Gianna than it had meant to me. Now, standing in the church fellowship hall with Vivielle Thomas's accusation hanging in the air, I finally understood. Gianna had told Owen that I'd criticized her cooking because she was black. That my comment about seasoning was actually a racial slur wrapped in the language of housekeeping. That I was the kind of woman who used polite criticism as a cover for prejudice. And Owen, my son, who I'd raised, who I'd taught to think critically and question assumptions, had believed her completely. "I didn't say anything like that," I said quietly. "I made a suggestion about seasoning, that's all." "That's not what Owen told us," Vivielle said. "He said you've been hostile to Gianna since the moment you met her. That you make comments about her appearance, her family, her culture. That you've made it clear she's not welcome in your family." The room tilted slightly. I reached for the table edge to steady myself. This wasn't possible. This was a complete inversion of reality. I'd tried so hard to make Gianna feel welcome. I'd asked her about her family. I'd complimented her dress at the wedding. I'd even given her my grandmother's china set as a wedding gift. "That's not true," I said. My voice sounded small. "I've never said anything like that." Owen showed us the texts, Vivielle continued. The things you've supposedly written to him about his wife. About her being not quite the right fit for the family. About her background being different. Those are his words, Delaline. His words about what you've said. I'd never written those things. I'd never said those things. But I realized in that moment that it didn't matter. The narrative had been constructed. The evidence had been manufactured. And I was standing in a church fellowship hall being publicly condemned for crimes I hadn't committed. I want to see these texts, I said. I want to see exactly what I supposedly wrote. Vivielle's expression shifted. Hardened. Owen said you might deny it. He said you'd gaslight everyone and claim you never said anything. There it was. The word that made it all impossible. Gaslighting. If I denied the accusations, I was gaslighting. If I defended myself, I was lying. If I asked to see the evidence, I was being defensive. There was no position I could take that wouldn't confirm the narrative they'd already decided was true. I'm leaving, I said. I picked up my purse from the back of the chair. My hands were steady now. That was strange. I'd expected them to shake, but they didn't. Everything felt very clear and very distant, like I was watching this happen to someone else. Running away? Vivielle called after me as I walked toward the door. That's what people like you always do. People like you. I didn't ask her what that meant. I already knew. The drive home took 15 minutes. I sat in my car in the driveway for another 10, just staring at the front door. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. The flower beds needed weeding. The mailbox was full. Normal life, continuing as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. My phone started ringing before I even got inside. It was my daughter, Kiraya, calling from 3 states away where she lived with her husband. Mom, what is going on? Owen just called me. He said you've been saying horrible things about Jana, that you've been racist to her, that you told him her family wasn't good enough for ours. I sat down on the couch. I never said that. He said he has texts, Kiraya said. Her voice was tight, angry. He said he's been trying to keep the peace, but you've been pushing and pushing, and he finally had to tell people the truth. Kiraya, listen to me. I don't know what he showed you, but I don't want to hear it, she interrupted. I can't believe you would do this. I can't believe you would treat his wife like this. Do you know how that makes our family look? Do you know what people are saying? The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I sat very still for a long time after that. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everything has changed, and you're the only one who knows it yet. My phone rang again. This time, it was my sister Larael, calling from 2 hours away. She didn't say hello. She just said, "Is it true?" "Is what true?" I asked, though I already knew. That you've been saying racist things about Owen's wife, that you've been telling people she's not good enough, that you've been making her feel unwelcome. No, I said. That's not what happened. Owen showed me the texts, Delaline. I saw them with my own eyes. You saw screenshots, I said. You saw whatever Owen wanted you to see. So you're denying it, Larael said. You're calling your son a liar. I'm telling you the truth. I made one comment about a casserole, that's all. But even as I said it, I knew how it sounded, how small and inadequate it seemed compared to the elaborate narrative that had been constructed. One comment about a casserole versus months of supposed hostility and racial prejudice. One small truth against a much larger, more compelling lie. I need to go, Larael said. I need to think about this. I need to think about whether I can support someone who would do this to their own son's wife. She hung up too. By evening, I'd received calls from 3 cousins, my brother, and 2 of my oldest friends. Each one had the same story. Owen had shown them evidence. Screenshots of texts I'd supposedly sent. Comments I'd supposedly made. A pattern of behavior that supposedly proved I was a racist who was trying to drive Gianna away from the family. I called Owen. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom, I need to know what's happening," I said. "I need to know why you're telling people I said things I never said." "Because you did say them," Owen said calmly. "You've been hostile to Gianna since the beginning. You've made her feel unwelcome. You've made comments about her background, her family, her appearance. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I can't do it anymore." "Owen, I never said any of those things. I made one comment about a casserole." "It's not about the casserole, Mom. It's about the pattern. It's about how you've treated her. It's about the way you look at her sometimes, the tone you use when you talk to her." "What tone?" I asked. "What pattern? I've been nothing but kind to her." "That's exactly what a racist would say," Owen replied. "That's exactly how this works. You do these things, and then you deny doing them, and then you act like you're the victim. I've read about this. I've done research. This is textbook racist behavior." I could hear Gianna in the background. She was saying something, but I couldn't make out the words. Owen said something back to her. They both laughed. "Is she there?" I asked. "Is she listening to this conversation?" "She's my wife," Owen said. "Of course she's here." "Owen, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever Gianna has told you about me, it's not true. I don't know why she's saying these things, but—" "I'm not going to let you attack my wife," Owen said coldly. "This conversation is over." He hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time after that. The house felt different now. Not like home anymore. Like a place I was visiting. A place where I didn't quite belong. The next morning, I woke to find myself tagged in a Facebook post by someone I didn't know very well. A woman named Paley Murray, who went to my church. The post was a long essay about how racism in America wasn't just about overt hatred. It was about the subtle ways that people with privilege maintained systems of oppression. It was about the microaggressions that made people of color feel unwelcome. It was about people who claimed to be colorblind, who claimed to treat everyone equally, but who actually harbored deep prejudices that came out in small ways. And then, at the bottom of the post, she'd written, "I'm thinking today about a woman who exemplifies this exact behavior. A woman who made racist comments to her daughter-in-law at a family dinner. A woman who has been making her feel unwelcome for months. A woman who is now gaslighting everyone about what she said. This woman is in my church community, and I think we need to have a serious conversation about what we're willing to tolerate." She hadn't named me. She didn't need to. Everyone would know who she was talking about. The comments had already started rolling in. People I'd known for years. People I'd served with on church committees. People whose children I'd taught in Sunday school. They were all expressing their outrage, their disappointment, their conviction that I was a racist who was harming a woman of color. I scrolled through the comments, my stomach getting tighter with each one. This is why we can't trust people like this. The racism is real, people, and it's in our communities. In our churches. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this. You deserve better. We need to hold people accountable for their racist behavior. The last comment was from Vivielle Thomas. She'd written, "Thank you for speaking out. We need more people willing to name racism when they see it. This woman has been exposed for who she really is." I closed the app. I couldn't read anymore. My phone rang. It was my boss, Cameo Murray, calling from my office downtown. I worked as a project manager for a mid-sized consulting firm. I'd been there for 12 years. "Delaline, I need you to come in and talk to me," Cameo said. "I've had some concerns brought to my attention about comments you've made, about your behavior toward colleagues of color." My heart stopped. "What comments?" "I'd rather discuss this in person," Cameo said. "Can you come in this afternoon?" "Of course," I said, but I already knew what this was. Owen had reached out to people at my workplace. He'd told them his story. And now, in the space of less than 24 hours, I was being investigated for racism at my job. I drove to the office in a daze. The parking lot looked exactly the same as it always did. The building looked the same, but everything had changed. I could feel it. The way people looked at me as I walked through the lobby. The way conversations stopped when I passed. The way my colleagues suddenly seemed very busy when I approached. Cameo's office was on the 4th floor. I took the elevator alone, which was a relief. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want anyone to see me. Cameo was sitting behind his desk when I walked in. He gestured for me to close the door. I did. "Sit down," he said. I sat. "I've been contacted by a family member of yours," Cameo began. "He's made some very serious allegations about your behavior. He says you've made racist comments, that you've created a hostile environment for people of color, that you've been discriminating against colleagues based on their race." "That's not true," I said. "I don't know what he's told you, but it's not true." "He provided me with documentation," Cameo said. He slid a folder across the desk toward me. "Screenshots of text messages, comments you've supposedly made." I opened the folder. Inside were printouts of text conversations. But they weren't my text conversations. The phone numbers were wrong. The dates were wrong. Some of the messages were things I'd never said. Others were real messages, but they'd been taken completely out of context. A message I'd sent to Owen 3 years ago about a work situation had been reframed as a racist comment about a colleague. A text I'd sent to Lara L. about a news story had been presented as evidence of my prejudice. "These aren't real," I said. "These are fabricated." "That's a serious accusation," Cameo said. "You're saying your son fabricated evidence?" "I'm saying these don't represent actual conversations I had." "I'm saying they've been manipulated." Cameo leaned back in his chair. He looked tired. "Delaline, I've known you for 12 years. I respect you as an employee, but I have a responsibility to my company. I have a responsibility to create an environment where people of color feel safe and welcome. If there's any possibility that you've engaged in discriminatory behavior, I have to take that seriously." "So, what does that mean?" I asked. "It means we're going to conduct an investigation. We're going to interview your colleagues. We're going to review your email records. We're going to look into whether there's any pattern of discriminatory behavior. And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, you're going to be on paid administrative leave, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow. Paid administrative leave. That was what happened to people who'd done something wrong. That was what happened to people who were suspected of serious misconduct. It didn't matter that I hadn't done anything. The suspension itself would tell everyone at the company that something was wrong, that I was being investigated, that there was smoke, and where there was smoke, there was fire. "For how long?" I asked. "Until the investigation is complete. Could be a few weeks. Could be longer." I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but I managed to stay upright. "I want to make a statement. I want to formally deny these allegations." "That's your right," Cameo said. but I'd recommend you talk to an employment lawyer first, before you say anything else. I left his office without another word. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked to my car. I drove home. By the time I got there, my phone had 17 missed calls. 16 of them were from family members. The 17th was from a number I didn't recognize. I called the number back. It was a lawyer named Daves Medina. He said that Owen had contacted him, that Owen wanted to pursue legal action against me for discrimination and emotional distress, that Owen was considering filing a formal complaint with the state's Civil Rights Commission. On what grounds? I asked. On the grounds that you've engaged in discriminatory behavior based on race, Dave said. That you've created a hostile environment for his wife, that you've caused her emotional harm. I haven't done any of those things. Do you have documentation? Daves asked. Do you have evidence that contradicts what he's saying? I thought about it. I had my own text messages with Owen. I had emails. I had a calendar of family events where I'd been nothing but welcoming to Gianna. But I also knew that none of that would matter, because the narrative had already been established. Because the story that Owen and Gianna had told was more compelling than the truth. Because in this moment, in this cultural moment, being accused of racism was almost as damaging as being guilty of it. I need to hire a lawyer, I said. That would be my recommendation, Dave said. This is going to be a difficult process. After I hung up, I sat on my couch and tried to process what was happening. In less than 48 hours, I'd gone from being a respected project manager, a devoted mother, a church volunteer, to being a racist, a woman who was under investigation at work, a woman whose own son was suing her, a woman who was being publicly condemned on social media. And the worst part was that I'd done nothing to deserve it. Over the next week, the situation spiraled in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The Facebook post that Paley Murray had written went viral within my church community. It was shared hundreds of times. People I'd known for decades started unfriending me on social media. The church leadership called me to a meeting and informed me that they would be conducting their own investigation into my behavior, that they couldn't, in good conscience, allow someone with my history to continue serving on committees or volunteering with children. My sister Larelle called me. She was crying. I've been thinking about what you said, she told me, about the texts being fabricated, and I started to wonder, so I called Owen. I asked him to send me the original text messages, not just screenshots. He said he didn't have them. He said he'd deleted them. He said Gianna had the originals, but she didn't want to share them because it was too painful. My breath caught. What did you say? I asked him why, if these were real conversations, he couldn't just show me the original messages. And Delaline, he got very quiet. He said something about how it didn't matter whether the exact words were there or not, that the important thing was that I understood the pattern of his behavior toward Gianna. Larelle, I know, she said. I know you didn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I believed him. I'm so sorry I didn't ask more questions. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to tell people the truth, Larelle said. I'm going to tell them that I don't believe these allegations, that I think Owen and Gianna have fabricated this entire situation. That's going to make things worse, I said. That's going to make Owen angry. I don't care, Larelle said. I'm not going to let my sister be destroyed by lies. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. When Larelle started telling people that she didn't believe the allegations, people accused her of being complicit in racism, of protecting a racist family member, of valuing family loyalty over racial justice. Within a week, Larelle had also been ostracized. She'd lost 2 friendships, A colleague had complained to her boss about her racist attitudes. She'd been removed from a volunteer position at her daughter's school. 2 days later, she called me again. "I can't do this," she said. She was crying. "I can't keep fighting. Everyone is against us. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It doesn't matter what the facts are. They've already decided that we're guilty." "I know," I said. I was crying too. "I'm going to tell people I was wrong," L'Oreal said. "I'm going to apologize for defending you. I'm going to say that I understand now how my behavior was harmful. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this stop." And she did. 3 days later, L'Oreal released a statement on Facebook, apologizing for her previous comments. She said that she'd been in denial about her family's racist behavior, that she was committed to doing the work of understanding her own prejudices, that she was sorry for the pain she'd caused Gianna. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People praised her for her courage, for her willingness to confront her own family, for her commitment to racial justice. She'd saved herself by sacrificing me. By the end of the second week, I'd lost almost everything. My job had terminated me for cause based on the investigation findings. They'd concluded that while they couldn't prove I'd made specific racist statements, my overall pattern of behavior and the complaints from multiple sources suggested that I was creating a hostile work environment. They were offering me a severance package if I agreed not to sue them. My church had officially removed me from all volunteer positions and asked me to attend services at a different time than the main congregation so that Gianna would feel comfortable attending. My daughter Kiriah had stopped returning my calls. My brother had sent me a letter saying that he couldn't have contact with me until I'd done significant work on my racism and had apologized to Gianna. And Owen had filed a formal lawsuit against me for emotional distress and discrimination, seeking $50,000 in damages. My lawyer, a woman named Edeline Estrada, sat across from me in her office and laid out my options. "We can fight this," she said. "We can go to trial. We can present evidence that the text messages are fabricated. We can call witnesses who will testify that you've never made racist statements. We can argue that your son has engaged in fraud and defamation." "But?" I asked. I could hear the "but" in her voice. "But the court of public opinion has already decided," Edeline said. "Even if we win in court, you've already lost. Your reputation is destroyed. Your family is fractured. Your career is over. A legal victory won't change any of that." "So what do you recommend?" I asked. "I recommend we try to settle," Edeline said. "We offer to pay him a smaller amount. We get him to agree to a non-disparagement clause. We try to get him to stop spreading this story publicly." "He's my son," I said. "I shouldn't have to pay him money to stop lying about me." "I know," Edeline said, "but the alternative is a very public trial where you'll have to relive all of this, where you'll have to defend yourself against accusations that, regardless of their truth, will be believed by most people, where the media will cover it as a story about racism in America, where you'll become a symbol of white privilege and racial insensitivity." I sat with that for a long moment. The choice between paying my son to stop destroying my life or fighting back and losing anyway. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "I'd start with an offer of $15,000, Edeline said. "See if he'll take it." I authorized the settlement offer that day. I expected Owen to reject it. I expected him to want more money, or to want to continue the legal battle, or to want something else entirely. But he accepted it immediately. $15,000 to make my son stop telling people I was a racist. $15,000 to buy his silence. $15,000 to try to salvage what was left of my life. The money was transferred 3 days later. The non-disparagement clause went into effect immediately. Owen agreed to stop publicly discussing the allegations. He agreed to take down the social media posts. He agreed to tell people who asked that the matter had been settled and that he preferred not to discuss it further. But the damage was already done. The story was already out there. The accusations were already embedded in people's minds. Even though Owen stopped talking about it, everyone else continued to. The story had taken on a life of its own. 3 months after the initial accusation, I was sitting in my apartment. I'd had to sell my house to cover legal fees and the settlement, when I got a message from Kairaya. She wanted to meet with me. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. I almost didn't recognize my daughter when she walked in. She looked older, tired, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. "I'm sorry," she said before she even sat down. "I'm so sorry, Mom." "For what?" I asked. For believing him without questioning it. For not asking to see the actual evidence. For just accepting his version of events because it seemed to fit with everything I was hearing about racism in America. For abandoning you when you needed me most. "You didn't know," I said. Nobody knew. He was very convincing. "But I should have known you," Kiraya said. "I should have known that you're not a racist. I should have known that you would never say the things he claimed you said. I should have trusted you more than I trusted him." We talked for 3 hours. Kiraya told me that she'd started to have doubts a few weeks after everything happened. She'd realized that the timeline didn't make sense. She'd noticed inconsistencies in Owen's story. She'd started asking him questions, and he'd become defensive and angry. Finally, she'd confronted him directly. "I asked him to show me the original text messages," Kiraya said. "The actual conversations, not screenshots, and he refused. He said it didn't matter. He said the important thing was that I understood his experience, and that's when I realized that he was lying." "Why did he do it?" I asked. "Why would he fabricate something like this?" "I think Gianna did it," Kiraya said. "I think she convinced him that you didn't like her, that you were being passive-aggressive toward her, that your comment about the casserole was actually a racist attack. And I think Owen, who's always been a bit insecure about his relationships, believed her. And I think once he'd told people, he couldn't take it back. He was too invested in the story, too committed to being the good guy protecting his wife from racism." "Have you talked to him?" I asked. "No," Kiraya said. "I tried. I told him I didn't believe the accusations anymore. I told him I thought he'd lied. He said I was being disloyal. He said I was choosing racism over family. He said he didn't want to talk to me anymore. So my son had cut off his sister too. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she'd refused to continue believing his lies." "I'm moving back here," Kiraya said. "I'm getting an apartment in town. I want to help you rebuild. I want to spend time with you. I want to try to fix this." I reached across the table and took her hand. For the first time in 3 months, I felt something other than despair. Over the next year, Kiraya and I worked on rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. The damage was extensive. I'd lost my job. I'd lost my house. I'd lost most of my friendships. I'd lost my church community. I'd lost my son, but I hadn't lost everything. I still had my daughter. I still had my sister. I still had my integrity, even if nobody else believed in it. I got a new job at a different consulting firm. It paid less than my previous position. But they didn't care about the accusations. They'd done their own background check and decided I was trustworthy. I found an apartment in a different neighborhood. It was smaller than my old house, but it was mine. I decorated it slowly, carefully, choosing pieces that made me happy rather than pieces that looked impressive. I started therapy with a woman named Carawell Palmer. She specialized in trauma and family estrangement. Every week, I sat in her office and tried to process what had happened. Tried to understand how my son could have done this to me. Tried to figure out how to move forward. "He's not a bad person," I told Carawell one day, about 6 months into therapy. "That's what makes it so hard. He's not evil. He's just weak. He believed his wife instead of his mother. He chose to believe a lie because it was easier than questioning her. He chose to destroy me rather than have a difficult conversation with his wife." "And how does that make you feel?" Carawell asked. "Angry," I said, "and sad and disappointed. But also relieved." "Relieved?" Carawell asked. "Because now I know who he is," I said. "I know that he's someone who will throw me under the bus to protect his marriage. I know that he's someone who will believe accusations without evidence. I know that he's someone who will destroy his sister to maintain his own narrative. And now that I know that, I can adjust my expectations. I can stop hoping that he'll come to his senses and apologize. I can stop waiting for him to realize that he was wrong. I can just accept that this is who he is." 2 years after the initial accusation, I was sitting in my apartment with Karaya when my phone rang. It was Owen. I almost didn't answer. I hadn't heard from him in almost 2 years. I didn't know what he wanted, but I answered anyway. "Hi, Mom," Owen said. He sounded different, older, tired. "Hello?" I said carefully. "I wanted to call you," Owen said. "To tell you. I wanted to apologize." I didn't say anything. I was waiting for the but. Waiting for him to explain why the apology didn't really mean anything. Waiting for him to try to justify what he'd done. "Gianna and I are getting divorced," Owen said. "We've been having problems for a while. And recently she told me that she'd made up the accusations against you. That she'd never actually believed I was racist. That she'd fabricated the whole thing to drive a wedge between us and our family." "Why would she do that?" I asked. "Because she wanted to isolate me," Owen said. "She wanted to make sure that my family couldn't interfere in our relationship. She wanted to make sure that I would be completely dependent on her. And it worked. It worked perfectly. Until I finally started to see what she was doing." "Owen," I started to say. "I'm sorry, Mom," Owen interrupted. "I'm so sorry. I know that an apology doesn't fix anything. I know that I destroyed your reputation. I know that I cost you your job and your house and your friends. I know that I hurt you in ways that I can't undo. But I needed you to know that I was wrong. That I'm sorry. That I should have asked you for your side of the story before I believed her." I listened to him talk. I listened to him try to explain. I listened to him beg for my forgiveness. And I realized that it didn't matter. His apology was too late. The damage was done. My life had been fundamentally altered by his actions. An apology couldn't change that. "I need to think about this," I said. "I need time." "I understand," Owen said. "Take all the time you need." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Kuriah found me there an hour later. "Was that Owen?" she asked. I nodded. "He apologized. He said Gianna made up the accusations. He said she was trying to isolate him." "Are you going to forgive him?" Kuriah asked. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if I want to." Over the next few months, I had several conversations with Owen. He explained what had happened. He told me about the red flags he'd missed. He told me about the ways that Gianna had manipulated him. He told me about how he'd finally seen through her lies, but I never agreed to reconciliation. I never told him that everything was okay, because it wasn't okay. It would never be okay. What he'd done had changed me. It had made me more cautious, more suspicious, more aware of how quickly people can turn against you, more aware of how easily lies can become truth in the court of public opinion. I'd learned that being innocent doesn't protect you, that being truthful doesn't protect you, that doing everything right doesn't protect you, that in a world where accusations are treated as evidence and where the court of public opinion moves faster than the actual courts, you're vulnerable no matter what you do. Today, 3 years after the initial accusation, I'm in a better place. I have a good job. I have an apartment I like. I have my daughter's love and support. I have a therapist who helps me process the trauma. I have a small circle of friends who believed in me even when the world didn't. But I'm also different. I'm more guarded. I'm more careful about what I say and to whom I say it. I'm more aware of how words can be twisted. I'm more conscious of how narratives can be constructed and weaponized. Owen and I have a limited relationship now. We talk occasionally. We see each other on holidays. But there's a distance between us that I don't think will ever be bridged. He's my son, but he's also the person who destroyed my life based on lies. And I've learned that those two things can both be true at the same time. The hardest part has been accepting that I'll probably never know exactly why Jana did what she did. Was it manipulation? Was it a deliberate attempt to isolate Owen? Was it something else entirely? I'll never know. And I've had to learn to be okay with that. What I do know is that my life was fundamentally altered by accusations that were completely false, that my reputation was destroyed by lies, that my family was fractured by fabrications, that the truth, in the end, mattered far less than the narrative. And I've learned that the best I can do is to keep living, to keep moving forward, to keep building a life that makes sense to me, even if it's not the life I expected to have. If you're facing false accusations, document everything. Get a lawyer immediately. Don't try to defend yourself in the court of public opinion. And remember that your truth matters, even if nobody else believes it. Hit follow if this hit close to home.